Okay.
Yeah. Just give it a go.
Okay. All right. All right. So yes, we're gonna start. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Capes and Lunatics. It's me, Phil. Lilith is here, and we have another special guest. You've probably seen her name all over comics these days. Yes, Torunn Gronbekk. How's that? How's that?
Oh, that's great.
All right. All right. Because again, I think I'm about 50-50 on names. So yeah, we've been talking about speaking to you for a while because I mean I've seen your name all over stuff like Thor, Punisher. I mean, really, what really lit us up was Venom and Carnage, and you just started Catwoman with issue 69.
Speak for yourself. I'm a huge Red Sonja fan.
Yes.
I mean, I understand that the men do enjoy. They do get very turned on by all the Venom. It seems to be
Really?
a thing.
Was it Red Sonja?
Well, I mean, the Red Sonja it sort of speaks for itself. But the week that I took over Venom, there was I think it was a PlayStation statue or something, and they announced it by going, "Get 16 inches of Venom," and I can assure you, the Venom people were happy. There was a lot of 16 inches DMs. I don't know.
Oh, so you're saying, yeah.
Well, like I was saying for the review when we reviewed Venom Last Dance, the modern interpretation of Eddie and a symbiote is basically a gay relationship, and I do feel like they leaned into that for the fans in that last movie. So yeah, it kind of makes sense to me. That tracks.
Yeah, I at some point, like doom scrolling on TikTok, I realized there's a whole Venom tongue community, and I mean, go with God, do what you want. This is great.
But I love your theory, Lilith. Yeah, so the symbiote is a clingy gay partner. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and again, we were very excited when we read that first issue of Catwoman. I mean, it's just like a spy thriller. We're all down for it.
It's such a strange thing because when I started writing that way, it was sort of in isolation in winter in Norway, and I did it without thinking about the fact that everyone would at some point read it. And then when it was announced, there were so many people who sort of DM'd me their ideas of what I should have done. And I realized there's going to be some pissed off people. But I enjoy it. I hope people will come along for the ride. It's a sort of love letter to Selena and everything. So I'm hoping that people will.
I think it's a great I like that it was Teeny Howard and then you took over. I was I was just hoping. I was like, I hope that not another guy takes over. Catwoman needs a break from male writers, and both you and Teeny have been kind of a breath of fresh air and the reinvigoration of Selena, being independent outside of Batman, and I think that's so important, and I think you've captured that so far. So I appreciate it.
Well, but I do respect because I realized there's a whole sort of community of people who would very much love to see Batman and Selena get together, and they're very horny, all of them, which I mean, good, again, good for them. And I get that totally, and I don't want to I try not to tell. I don't want to say anything about what's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yes, no spoilers.
Because it's just it's such a strange thing, and I find it fascinating when people ask me directly, "Is this going to happen?" It's sort of I don't think that's my job to tell you, at least not until the book. I don't know. But I do see I understand where they're coming from. But then again, I do also think that it is an odd thing to have a character and then think that the most interesting part of her is her ex-boyfriend, if you know what I mean. It's I love Selena for Selena in everything, and I hope people will see that in the book, because it is just me having a ball and being sort of somewhat disappointed that we can't get just more pages of Selena just being, just walking around being magnificent.
I mean, we've talked before about all those characters around Batman. Everyone besides Batman, they don't need to be in Gotham, and sometimes it does their story more justice getting outside of Gotham. Was that part of your plan? Just I need to get her out of Gotham to.
Well, it was first of all, it was one of those things that DC sort of asked me, like, if it's possible, what do you think? Where would you take her if you could? And that's sort of a great way to kick something off. I think they would have let me do pretty much whatever I wanted, but it was Ariana, the editor, who's just she's so good. And we had a few conversations sort of about identity and who we like, how we felt about Selena and where we would want to see her, and it matched up so well. And as I said, like this, I wrote this last winter, and it was just one of those joyful, glorious things. And it's such a different process from writing Carnage or Venom, because like we've gone for a very realistic tone and everything, which I like. But it also means that I'm checking the ferry schedule between like Berlin and Sweden, and trying to figure out like how long would it take. So like when you do Carnage, you could just do like, oh, he's wearing some dude as a meat puppet. I'm sure that checks out. Sure. And then like Jordan, the poor editors, sometimes he'll be like, so how does he do? And we're like, well, he keeps him alive, keeps the blood pumping, and then whatever, it's Carnage. I'm sure it's possible.
So it's almost more challenging to write something really like grounded, set in the real world.
Oh God, yes. Oh yeah. and the thing is, like, I'm from Norway, and she's heading to Sweden at some point. And when that was announced, the Swedes, I got like a bunch of texts from Swedish people being like, "Oh, you better not fuck this up." Oh, can I swear?
Yeah, go.
Oh yes, feel free.
Oh, thank God, because I'm from Norway and we do swear a lot.
Oh, so they were so the Swedes were already over you. They were just like, yeah, don't.
Oh yeah,
you
better. And I'm trying to not sort of, we have Norway and Sweden have those, like with every neighboring countries, we have those sort of fun jokes about each other and everything. And I'm trying not to poke fun at them, because I love the Swedes. I think they're great.
I'm just waiting for the headline now. Torunn Gronbekk fears
Starts
setting off a civil war between Norway and Sweden. Yes.
I mean, if like Null didn't, Null and King in Black and everything. Null in Norwegian and Swedish means like a sloppy fuck. Like you would null someone behind the dumpster behind the bar. You know what I mean? And that made it to the sort of front page of the cultural section of the Norway's biggest newspaper. And like, you Google this if you want. Null is coming, which is how they announced it, in a sort of drippy white font. And I mean, it's comics. It's just fun. It's great.
Oh my
Lord!
Lord!
Like every time I wrote Null in the scripts, like every time,
it's a little giggle.
Like it's just like, it's impossible not to, right?
Oh my Lord! You have to come back all the time and talk to us.
talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Or are you just like, no, that's those Americans? No, they're crazy. No.
What I'm just so scared that my Norwegian bluntness at some point is going to get me in trouble in America, because I'm going to say something. The thing is, I love Americans. I love America. It's just, but right now you're sort of, you're all freaking
we're going
out.
through a few things.
I was going to say, you don't want to worry about being blunt these days. People will say,
we need all the humor we can get over here.
Well, I mean, it's just so weird to sort of observe, and it would be nice just right now in this world if you could just keep your head just for a few months. That would be great. But we're not going to get into it. I'm just saying.
No, yeah, I know. Anymore, I'm just like, the rest of the world must be just laughing at us. It's
like terrified giggling. But I mean, we are terrified, though, just to be clear. Like, it is. It would be.
You're terrified.
Yeah. If we just like some, I don't know, just some common sense to sort of drip into the discourse, that would be good. Just
please,
tiny bit.
Please. But so after Venom War, we're getting a bunch of new books. Are you going to be on any more Venom or Carnage, or
that you can say?
Nothing that is announced. And right now I'm doing Catwoman, and I'm writing a creator-owned book that's not announced either. But I'm sort of, I don't know. indulging myself in these books. It feels like, because it's just such a joy to. It's so creatively sort of challenging, while being sort of, it's fucking Catwoman, right? Like it's so cool. I don't know.
And just like everyone else we talk to, I'm sure you're doing multiple books because, I mean, everyone says you get in the comics for the love. You don't get into it for the money. So
No, that's the love.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, you get into it because you sit there in a corner and you're like, this is the coolest thing ever. I love it so much. It's just the best. And then you get the art and it's just like, oh, this is somehow even cooler. It's just the best thing ever. And then it's released out there in the world, and then someone's like, hey, in Thor 232 and page, and it's just, oh, great, I forgot about this part. That's always, no, but it is great. We love comics.
Nerd picking. Gotta love it.
No, but it's one of those, and sometimes with Thor, I got into some like Marvel Thor versus my Thor, which is the one that I grew up with. Discussions with people that I thought, like, this is possibly the stupidest thing a woman in her 30s could do. Like, what am I doing? What is this? But it is what it is. We all love Thor.
did you have to do a lot of research just to be like, okay, Marvel Thor differs from my Thor in this way, or?
Oh yeah. The thing is, I'm named after Thor. My name literally means the one who is loved by Thor. My dad is Thor. Like, it's a whole thing. And my mom, she, like, the myths of the Old Norse myths were the ones, like the stories that I grew up with. So I know them very, very well. And sometimes, like, I would have discussions with like Will Moss about things like the zombies things that you like, or the frost giants. Like, they're not like frost giants. That's dumbing it down. Like, Jotner are like, they're a thing. Like, everything can be Jotner. You can have a cat as a Jotner. And it's and then like we just get into like, no, but it's frost giant Thor, and just go with it. They're blue, they're big, they're strong. Just leave it alone. I'm like,
So the challenge of Thor is you can't like make it to, you can't go too, do they feel they have to dumb it down sometimes for the audience?
I think I don't.
Simplification, I believe, is the word they like to use.
I think the only time I feel like we're dumbing anything down is when you have to do those, like, oh, this is Sif, and as you know, and then you tell all of Sif's story, like those info dumps, and I hate those so much, and they always sort of add them in at the very end when like we're 2 hours away from sending it to print, and someone's like, hey, who's Sif again? And then like, I'll have to put something in there to remind everyone. And I think, like, the audience, they're smarter, that I don't think they need it.
Yeah, Google is free.
Yeah, and but then I had a panel at some point about like Thor, and I was trying to explain how Odin was inside of Mjolnir, and how the spirit, and they were like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I do realize that sometimes we sort of get into the ridiculous continuity that sometimes possibly needs to be explained a little bit. I will concede that point.
But it's comics. It's like, oh, how is Odin in the hammer? Magic.
It's, of course he's there. Like, it was great. I loved the Odin in the hammer. It was one of those things that I don't think I would have ever done that, but Donnie had already done it. So then I have this like Odin, who is the wisest and also a bit of a basic bitch in many ways. Like, it's so fun to have him hanging around, just commenting on everything. And we did that in Jane Foster and the Mighty Thor. She had Mjolnir and Odin, and they were sort of bickering along the way. It's great. Excellent fun, but completely ridiculous. And when I tried to explain this to my mother, she was like, she was about to, she gave up on Marvel when I told her that Jason at some point burned down Yggdrasil, like the World Tree. And she was like, well, that's it. There's no more anything. I'm like, well, it's comics. She said, no, can't do that. And she was very offended by the entire thing. And she has never, ever read anything I've ever done for Marvel. This is sort
Oh,
of, yeah.
Oh,
well, at least you have
Oh,
Catwoman now.
well, I'll have
You
to
can give her some other.
try to tell these are the other people. They would never burn Yggdrasil. Like they do other things. See.
but I'm so it seems like yes, a sign of the comics I like is like when the current writer like will use elements like the previous writer did, and because I don't know, it just bothers me sometimes when creators are coming. It's just like I'm sweeping everything off the shelf, I'm reinventing the wheel, and it's like a lot of times it's like you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You add your own signature to it, but it's like don't forget everything that came before it.
Well, I think that it's hard when you have to do like at some point something else has to happen. But I do mostly enjoy going sort of back to basic with the characters, just generally. But I do realize like there is something to be like, hey, Thor in space. Like I can see how you would get there when you're sort of running out of ideas. Um, or when you sort of need something new to sort of get the audience recommitted somehow. But I personally I do enjoy sort of going back to basics, which is sort of what I try to do with Catwoman. Just thinking like who like she's a world class fucking thief, and we know in many ways like a lot of the things that we think we know about her are sort of out there. This is not necessary. She never confirms anything, which is sort of delightful in a way. And there is something interesting in having a character who has built herself and sort of chosen very specifically what people get to know and what they don't get to know about you. If that makes sense. And it's interesting when you have like she has had several other identities in the past, and how they differ from how she is now, which I find it interesting, and especially right now because her identity is compromised, so she sort of has the choice of either um, throwing everything, like throwing Selena Kyle away and starting over with someone new, and she doesn't want to do that, and without necessarily knowing exactly why, which I find it's a fascinating and interesting place to be with her.
In a way, is it better writing Catwoman than Batman? Because Batman, everyone has their preconceived notions of who Batman is. Batman can't do this. Batman does this. That Batman can, wouldn't do this. But it's like Catwoman, you can kind of have more creative freedom.
Well, I think so. Well, I suppose you could do whatever you wanted with Batman too, as long as the writing is good enough. You know what I mean? But I think people would be if you took Batman away from Gotham for a year and just sort of fucked around in Asia or something, I think there would be some reactions to that. I would assume. I don't know.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But it is a sort of like it's hard to write if you take everyone's expectations into consideration, especially when like a lot of the fans, I don't think they necessarily know exactly what they want, especially when it comes to like do they want them to be happily ever after? Do you want a book where like Bruce is he forgot to buy toothpaste, so he's going back to the store? Like what? Like there's a sunset that's beautiful. Like I don't know. It's just, there is something so exceptionally tedious and beautiful about happiness, I suppose.
Wow.
She said as she's sort of like I keep like strolling around in the forest and be like this is the best thing ever, but it is boring. Unless there's like I have a cabin in the Swedish forest, and there's all sorts of animals sort of walking past, and that's my social media presence. It's just like here's a moose, and then Americans are like, yay, it's a fucking moose. Oh yeah, it's so cool, it's great. That's it.
You love chaos, huh?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like there is something. I don't think you ever get tired of being like, oh, there's a fox on my porch. Like that's it never gets old, right? So I mean, like I'm happy as long as there's a fox on my porch, but I will say that it wouldn't make for a very interesting anything really. But I will say that in my forest people, because like I have a house in like suburbia and the cabin in the forest, and when I go to the forest, I get to meet all the people who live there full time, and they're all fucking insane. Like it's the best thing, but they are just beautifully. Like I had a conversation the other day where I think I might have agreed to do some arson, or at least sort of not tell anyone that they would, because they're sort of at some point we were having a discussion about something and they're very angry about the specific guy, and at some point because they were like, I was like, oh, so what are you going to do? And they're like, oh, like, no, I don't know. So they were like, oh, I'm like, no, I don't. What do you mean? And then a guy took up his lighter and he just flicked it, and I was like, oh, okay. And then we all laughed. And then we just left it. And I'm like, what happened now? What did I do? What did I say?
I'm
But
glad
anyway,
to see that's universal. People that live in the backwoods being their own little offbeat selves is a universal thing. I love that. It's not just an American thing.
but I will say that they're also sort of the most like glorious. Like I once I told someone that I was running out of firewood and I was there for a while, and that's one of those things that you really can't do. You have to go out with a fucking chainsaw or something if like you have to have firewood, right? And within 20 minutes, some strange man that I never met was standing in front of my door with a tape measure because he was going to measure my oven to figure out like how big the logs would have to be. And then 2 hours later, he came like he had like a huge one of those, like a tractor and a bag and more firewood than you need in a year, specifically cut down to size. Like these are the best people. Just don't piss them off because fire.
I mean, I think they're the more honest people because again, like if you the more people you live around, like in a city or something, people are I think are afraid to be seen as weird. If you're living in the woods, I don't think anyone cares. They're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna be who I'm gonna be.
Yeah,
it's the dream. It's the dream.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, that was sort of one of the things that I enjoyed about the pandemic. That I realized, like if everything goes to shit, if I get some chickens and maybe like some goats or something, I'll probably be perfectly happy somewhere in the forest somewhere. It's gonna be fine. Just but let's not test that theory though. Let's try to keep it going for a bit more.
Well, speaking of keeping it going, like you, how did you get into comics? Like, did you pitch it? Did you have a friend that brought you in, or?
Well, I suppose I did what everyone else who wants to. Well, I did what everyone else who wants to write comics should do, which is I wrote a bunch of comics, and I traveled around on doing all the cons and tried to, awkwardly sell people the book, which is just a mortifying thing, at the best of times. But it was sort of nice to meet people and sort of figure out which sort of playground you want to be in comics, if that makes sense. And then at some point I met, like, I knew a bunch of the comics people, and I was talking to Jason Aaron during New York Comic Con a few years ago, and he Al Ewing and Jason was writing Valkyrie, but Al had too much to do, so he had to step away, and they needed a new co-writer, and there was this ridiculous Norwegian person who, and he'd read, like, he checked some of my comics out and he was like, she's a decent writer, let's just send some of my stuff to Will Moss at Marvel, and then they gave me a chance, and I was very grateful for that because it's been really fun. Sort of a very different, because when you write creator own, you can like wank around your script for months and months and make it perfect, and it's a very I don't know, it's like creative masturbation in a way when you're sort of like, oh, I'm so brilliant, this is so good, because no one is telling you otherwise, which is great. But at Marvel it's a bit more like, oh, you're gonna do the book, okay, great, with like it's Tuesday, do you think we can get an outline on Friday? And it's like, oh, okay, let's okay, we can do that. And luckily, I managed to get the outline done on Friday and the script done at some point. But it's a very different sort of ball game than just doing your own stuff. It's fun.
So that was one of the questions. We did get a question. Someone was asking how to break into comics and stuff and how to get a job with the big two. So basically, that's what I figured it was. So start your own thing and then maybe shop it around. And
I think I had, before I started working at Marvel, I'd already written a thing for DC that was never published, which was sort of like a sort of heartbreaking thing. Like I delivered the script on Tuesday and the editor quit on Thursday, and I was like, oh, cool. Oh, so what's gonna happen with the thing? And they're like, oh, it's gonna somewhere in the depths of somewhere, right? So I've actually written Batman. It just never happened to, like, it disappeared somewhere. But all of the things that I've sort of ever gotten offered before I started working for Marvel was based on one web comic that I did that wasn't necessarily very good, but I showed that I could do some things. I paid an artist to have it done, and I just wanted something out there. So because it's like you can't expect people to read a script to see if you know how to write, because reading scripts, it's the most tedious thing you can do. So getting like write a short story that's fucking brilliant, and then pay someone their page rate to draw it, and then have it there in all the bios and all your social media. So if someone meets you and finds you interesting, they can read it and be like, oh, you can do this thing. And if you can show that you can do like proper sequential storytelling, you can do that in 12 pages. That's pretty much all it takes. You just have to, I mean, I'm not going to say you're going to get work at Marvel if you make a 12-pager. I'm just saying, like, to keep someone attention and get them interested enough in you. You just have to show them that you know what you're doing. And the same thing with artists. I think, like, even if you do the most beautiful like pinups and everything, you need the sequential pages showing the comic storybook, like the storytelling, right? So having a portfolio where you sort of immediately get into the interior pages, I think that's very important. Just, yeah. And then just be everywhere, to go to the cons and talk to the people who you admire. And comics is such a small community that you can hang out with the people who make the books that you love. Just don't be the guy with like the iPad at the bar trying to, because no one, once we get to the bar, no one wants to read a comic, you know? You haven't been out of the house for months. We want to drink. But I mean, it's just. But if you make a very good impression at the bar, and then the next day you send a nice message on Twitter, be like, "Hey, you remember me? I was the one who told all those funny jokes," and then you have that 12-pager in your bio, then maybe something. I don't know.
And like, you live over in Norway, so it's like, could you have just like emailed them things, or did you have to, like, do you think just you have to meet somebody in person?
I think it's still a very personable business, no matter how much we say it's like really changed from the 90s when we started reading comics, where, you know, you could walk across the street, shake hands, and make Marvel versus DC comics. Like, that's just not a thing. But I still think the community, like the artists and the writers, are still personable, and you probably want that human touch.
Yeah. I think going to cons is just, and just being a nice person is sort of, that's the way to go. But just keep making work, whatever you can do, right? Whatever you can afford to do, because if you're a comics writer, you're obviously sort of reliant on either, I do have to draw it yourself, or you need someone you can work with, and asking an artist to do something for free, that doesn't, like, maybe if you're very good friends and they're very hungry and you like, but you can't expect them to do a whole book in a month, because it's just so much fucking work, right? So I think having a lot of respect for the fact that artists are they are pulling the heavy loads in comics, like however much I sit around and you know, I will be the tortured artist so much you have no idea. Like I'm the most obnoxious, horrible, pretentious idiot in the world while I'm at the cabin in Sweden. Be like, oh, how can Punisher kill someone in an interesting way? Let's find out. So
When in doubt, get a bazooka. That's my
well,
personal
well, the thing is,
favorite.
the Punisher thing that was they were doing the Punishers as the head of the hand, and he was not
Mhm.
supposed to use any like firearms in any way. So I was like, okay, so if you can't do any weapons, so he can have like a sword, but how many? Like you can kill a few people with a sword, but we have to have other ways to. And at some point, like Tom Brevoort, he pitched the idea of like just as a structure, like could Frank kill someone, like one person on every page of a book? And it was sort of and I was like, well, I suppose we can try. And at some point I ran into the sort of, well, we need very many different sharp objects somehow, or I don't know, because we can't just do the same thing over and over again. And so we didn't do exactly the 30 deaths in 30 pages, but we did kill a fuckload of people. And I had a moment where I was in Sweden, and I was chopping again firewood because it's very cold over here and we do need firewood. And I was sort of lamenting over like, how can we just need something like fun, and I want people to be like, oh, that sort of visceral feeling you get when that's what I wanted. Have you seen American History X?
Yes.
Yeah, you know that, like in the beginning when he has
The
to
curve.
bite.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't even see it, like they cut away, but it's still the most horrifying thing ever put on screen. That's what I wanted, but I couldn't find it. Anyway, point was, even though we spend a lot of time with the scripts and figuring things out, the artist is there in front of a white paper trying to figure something out, and then they send it over, and we'll be like, oh, can you change it a little bit? Like it's just such they are the fucking heroes, so you can't expect them to work for free, is what I'm saying. So get some money together, make sure, and the thing is, like if you have to pay for someone to draw your script, you better make it good. It's an investment for you too.
Yeah, we
So
yeah, we have a friend who does a Kickstarter comic, and he just tells me how hard it is. Because like if you say you want to write a comic, then you have to find a creative team, and then you have to you have to do all the creative stuff, but then you also have to be like your own press, and get the word out, and do all.
Yeah.
You have to be a shipping department. You have to be
There's
everything.
pros and cons for doing it each way for sure.
yeah, but then like, and I realized like it's always interesting when you meet other creators and you realize you're standing in a room with a bunch of other people who does much the same as I do. It's just I know them from their creator on work. I do not know them from their Marvel or DC work, right? So it's there's a sort of ego in it too. Like I want something where no editor could go, hey, you can't use the word deep state. It's going to upset some people. And I'll be like, what? But which has happened, when you have to sort of shave off the edges to make it more palatable to whoever, and that's always sort of. I do find I really want to do something where nothing is shaved off and it's just right there, and no one has to read through the lines to figure out what I was trying to say.
And a lot of people deny this, but like if you're writing a Marvel book, like do they always kind of make you aware? It's like, okay, well if you're writing something in the MCU, or is it just okay, well you can't do this or do this because it's going to be in a movie? Or
Well, I mean, there's usually you'll check, right? Can we use this character and this character and this character? Is that fine? And then for the most part, you can do whatever you want because we're a little ahead of the MCU anyway. So they're sort of just mining whatever the comics are doing for whatever they want to do, right? And I think for the most part, the only time I've ever had a sort of I should tell people this, but I'll do it anyway. Like, I remember I had Loki do something that was a little too villainy, and that was just before the Loki series was coming out, and they were like, well, we would sort of like to have him more as a sort of, a little more, he's a jolly good guy, he's just morally something, which is obviously fine. It's just I mean, he is sort of, he is a bit of a baddie in many ways, so I always think it's sort of fun to sort of push that. I don't know, but I think that's the only time I've ever gotten like directly, hey, we're doing this in the movie, so let's try to change something. But I mean, we had but there are things happening in other parts of the comics sort of universe that which makes us using some character very hard, or we have to like change around some things, or and we do sometimes get into sort of odd, especially with the sort of more B characters. They're all like, a lot of the time they'll be supporting characters and they'll have a very specific role, and then they'll keep sort of repeating that role in different series for different people, and it seems it's not necessarily great character development if you were to look at that character specifically. And then because it's Marvel, you obviously have like a whole fandom that's completely obsessed with that one specific character, who's like, hey, Enchantress wouldn't both do this in that series and do this in another series, and we're like, that's
You got me.
yeah. The Enchantress people are intense, but I get it. I fucking love her. She's great.
What about Red Sonja fans? Like, were you like a fan of Red Sonja when you got the book, or?
Oh yeah, the thing is, Red Sonja is in many ways a much bigger deal in Norway than any of the Marvel things, because she's been around as an actual comic in stores here for a long time. She isn't at the moment. You have to go to a comic book store, but for a long time that was sort of like she was there. So I when I started writing for Marvel, I had very few reactions from the Norwegian community, and then Red Sonja was announced, and I got this sort of like, "Don't you fuck it up! Like, you have our national pride on your shoulders," and but I grew up with Red Sonja and sort of getting issues. Like, I used to buy. I keep telling people, but because it's true. Like, I used to buy all my comics at this local thrift store. So everything was sort of like out of order, and I would always just get whatever I could get. But Red Sonja was always great, because it's just one of those the first kick-ass hot, but still sort of like she had a personality, which was nice, and not necessarily a necessity in the 90s, which is when I sort of came online. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I love Xena, so like when I the first time like I ever saw Red Sonja, I was just kind of like, oh, and I liked Hercules and all that stuff too, so I was just like, it's kind of perfect. And Red Sonja, she doesn't disappoint. Like, the whole time, I've never been disappointed in a single run for Red Sonja. I can't say that about too many other comic book characters. So
no, that is interesting. I think I agree with that. I have some that are sort of like my absolute favorites, but I think she sort of holds up in a sort of fascinating way. And she's one of those, like, it's just a joy. Like, I don't feel the need to teach anyone anything when I'm writing Red Sonja. Like, it's just sort of it's just a good time.
Action, adventure, fun, but she still has a lot of pathos to her. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. But it is sort of like sometimes, like, I had a guy, and he was like, there was a very specific thing. I'm not going to mention what it was because it was so weird. And he came over and he said, like, "Oh, this is obviously this is obviously like a metaphor for, and a very like something." And I'm like, no, it's true. It's truly not. I like that you think. And it was very once again very horny. I do know a lot about the sexual interests of the comic book fans, but I do love them for it. I do think it's I think it's a horny medium. But I tried to explain like no, I didn't. There are no metaphors like in Red Sonja. It's all literal. I'm sorry. It is just what it is. We're just it's just a good time. And Walter is a sort of dream artist in many ways because he needs so little and he does so much. And it's just I don't know. It's just a great time.
I think we've
Did you
discovered.
get to pick him, or did they just team you up over at Dynamite?
Oh, I badged Joe. I wanted Walter, and then he made it happen. So that
Nice.
was yeah, that was very lovely of him. And it's worked out sort of so well. It's just he's the sweetest, loveliest guy, and it made me a red Sonja. So I'm trying to paint one to. I'm trying to paint her for him, and it's so hard to do because she's so beautiful. Yet he keeps doing it. I don't know.
I think we found the secret to modern comics. Can leave them horny.
Well, duh.
Well, I mean, I think just I had this is again. Listen. It's late here. I'm just gonna talk. I bought someone's comics collection last year because they had some very specific books, and I got sort of a picture from like a friend of a friend who's like, "Hey, are you interested in this?" And they had some comics on the very top that I was like, "Yeah, I'll buy those." So there were the very interesting like war books that I wanted on top, and then the rest was just like porn, like it was just comics porn from the 60s and 70s, some Finnish, a bunch of like Belgium stuff and French stuff and Danish stuff, and I don't know, it's so good. Like I think that was one of the main reasons for why I got into comics myself, just those like the odd horniness that they couldn't help themselves from put into the comics. And like I have a book that's just it's two people sort of fucking in space in for 20 pages, and then it's just like, oh, it's a universe, like it's was created, now we created a universe. I'm like, sure, whatever you want, whatever you say, like this is great.
Wow, I almost feel like there's a message behind that. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I think it's deep. It's something. It's like the mother and the father. I don't know. That's whatever.
Oh, I did want to ask you about like like your creative technique, your process. Like I'm always interested in this. So like when you sit down to write, do you like is it the same time every day? And do you need complete silence or do you have music on?
Well, I mean, it's all day, every day. That's what it is. I'm probably writing too much for a while now, so I'm just sort of it's a chaotic process. No, uh I like to have a certain amount of noise in the room. I love to work at sort of the library, but it sort of takes an effort to be presentable enough to, leave the house. So when all else fails, I'll find something horrible on YouTube, just like the perfect, like almost interesting yet not, like people talking about their planners or something, and that just yabber on forever, and then I'll sit down and write. And it's always it's an interesting process because it's like usually there's an outline. Usually I know pretty well where we're going with the issue, but that's sort of just sort of a vague roadmap, right? Like I know, like I want to figure out how to get to the destination in the most interesting way, and sometimes I'll do horrible things in the outline, like I'll write like, oh, so like Loki and Jane, they're flirting like it's the best conversation ever. Like it's wildly hot in some way, and it's just like, oh, I have to write that nonsense now. Like I don't know how to like. So you sort of you add in little things in the outline that turns out to be horribly difficult to do. Um, and I tend to jump around from all the different pages, and it isn't until I have all the pacing down, like I have something on every page and every panel, like I know where all the little beats are going. Uh, it's not before then it gets fun, and that's about, I would say, 90% of the work is just pulling teeth, and then the rest is like, oh, so brilliant, so good. And then you're back to, you know, terrified. Am I really? Sometimes you write something and you're so proud of yourself, and then you read it next day and you're like, who was this fucking pretentious cunt? Like, what happened yesterday to make me think this was good? And then the worst part is when you do that and you send it off to an editor, and then you wake up in the morning like, but that, I mean, you never know. That's the thing. So I spend a lot of time just waiting to hear if it's good enough, and then it's usually okay.
And every day, or are you just like, I'm going to write a couple pages of this, or are you just like, okay,
one book at a time.
Monday is Catwoman day, Tuesday is Red Sonja
Yeah.
day, like that?
I do like this week is Catwoman day. The thing is, like, usually there is, when you do a bunch of books at the same time, you get like, oh, can you do a lettering draft for tomorrow? And here are some notes. We need your notes back by the end of the day. And so you're sort of pulled into different, so you can never just do like one thing cleanly. Just because you're working with other people, and you get pages from, which is a fucking delight, just to be clear, just to get pages from people like blessing my inbox every other hour or something. And it's beautiful, right? And you just have to look at the colors and the lettering, and then and usually when the lettering is done, there are quite a lot of notes from like different editors, because you'll send it around to sort of check that we're not living in our own little echo chamber, and we've sort of read ourselves. How can I say it? I don't know. Like, if you get too used to a story and you forget that not everyone is in your head, so you send it off to other people who are like, who the fuck is this guy? And then you realize you have to add something to the page after the art is done to explain who the fuck that guy is. And those things sort of, they take up a surprising amount of time, and I can never seem to. Sometimes it'll be like one sentence. Like, I know that the sentence is supposed to be like, it's supposed to be funny. Like Spider-Man is always it's a very hard character to write, because he's such a, when you have a good Spider-Man line, but that also means that when you don't. So you're sort of like what he's supposed to say, and that there must be a way to tweak it to make it that sort of delightful Spider-Man-y thing, but you just don't have it yet. And then sort of and suddenly you spend like 5 hours on one fucking line, and then like I had a line in, we did Venom War now, and I had a line somewhere with like a PG-13 joke, which was, it was so I thought it was funny, but then like Tom, the editor, he's like, hey, the PG-13, that wasn't a thing until like 1969 or something, and we're supposed to be in the 60s. And then I'm like, well, Eddie Brock is already a journalist, and he became a journalist because of the Bay of Pigs, and like the timeline doesn't work out anyway. Can we just keep the joke? And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And it's just, this is an entire Friday lost to trying to figure out how to replace the PG-13 joke, and it's a ridiculous way to live, but it's better.
I love the exciting time scale. You gotta love it.
Well, I mean, it is. I had an even worse one in Punisher once, because I had a guy who was there was Frank said something like, I bet the guy at the army surplus store like comes in his pants when he see you coming, or something like something. And that's not like, you can kill however many people you want, but there are no, like, sex doesn't exist in Marvel, just to be clear. And I spent like like hours trying to be like, cream his pants, like, no. Like, are there like hard? Is that, could it tights? Like, can they get tight? No. And it was just like me and the poor editor being like, no, Torunn, no, just do something else. I'm like, but I want the stupid joke. Like, it's such a stupid thing I just wanted. And again, like 7 hours of my life trying being like googling like hard-on synonyms. Like what other how can we sneak this past? And you don't want to do that either, right? Like I don't want to like sneak something past Marvel and then having them figure out that I was so I'm trying to be like, hey, this like in Britain this would mean would that be cool? They're like, no, it's not cool, just stop it. But
yeah, I feel like that's an American thing. It's like, yeah, they can show the most graphic violence, but don't
Heaven forbid a woman have an orgasm.
don't
Oh,
mention
God, no.
sex. Don't mention sex at all. Yeah.
I don't think we do that. I think that's and I find it so interesting because you have these I like the X-Men. They're a horny bunch, right? The fans are horny, the characters are horny. Like, but we'll never like we're not gonna acknowledge it in any way. That's what we're doing. It's all gonna be quiet looks from panel to panel. I don't know.
Well, until Emma Frost shows up anyway.
I was gonna say Emma Frost wears a couple patches, but no one's thinking of no.
Oh, but I would like more horniness in comics, is what I'm saying. There's a general theme of this conversation. I'm sorry.
No, you fit right in. Don't worry about it. But what are the differences like the of working? So you've worked for Dynamite, you worked for DC, you've worked for Marvel. Like, what are like the idiosyncrasies of like working at the different companies?
Well, it's hard to say because it's more sort of working with specific people, I suppose. Like you have editors who do things like I have. You get to know certain editors, and you know that like he's gonna have all his notes at the very end, which is gonna be annoying, but like that's what's gonna happen, right? So you get into and he's not gonna have any notes at all, so that's gonna be great. Or you know, she's gonna react to that thing with that specific characters because that's her favorite character. But like with Dynamite, it seems to be a sort of they have a lot of trust in like I don't think I've gotten like a proper note. I think we had to change again. The one thing that I think every editor I've ever worked with has told me is to kill less children. And I told Joe like, oh, like I keep being told to kill less children. I was in the preface like I'm a mother. I do respect whatever, but it's just it's an effective way, and children can be very annoying. So I told him like the people keep telling me, and he's like, "Oh, no one's going to tell you that at Dynamite. You can kill how many children you want." I'm like, yeah. And then the first issue we do is like there was a 0 issue for the Free Comic Book Day thing, and I had technically there was supposed to be like a child sacrifice, and he's like, "Oh, we can't do it, Torunn, because this is sort of it's free for all the kids. Yeah, you can't." And then I had like I had some tits in there and some different things, and then but Joe goes in and he's like, "Oh, we're gonna change tits to bosoms and it's gonna be fine." And so he makes it very easy for me. Joe is a fucking hero. But it's so Dynamite is very sort of easygoing in every way. DC has so far been just like it's just again creatively it's a sort of different experience in many ways because it's such a specific book. But then I would say Ariana did a thing when you see the team that she assembled. It's so perfect for the book that we're doing. And it's one of those like you can't sort of underestimate how much work the editors put into just getting the end product that you end like that you even after you sort of talk through everything and you find out where the story goes, there's so much work yet just finding the right people for it. And I'm not sure how that if it's always the case at DC, but you can kind of see that we had the time to find just a brilliant team. At Marvel, we are sometimes a little more like, okay, we need someone next week. Who has the time? And then like with Carnage, I wrote the first issue was 30 pages, and I had the first 15 pages, I think, written before we knew Perry was doing the book. So you can sort of tell that by the 15-page mark, I've started because when you find out who you're working with, you go through and you see a bunch of their work, and you try to sort of adjust so you work with something you think they're going to enjoy and be good at. And I think you can almost tell, like, that's when I knew Perry was on the book. And it would obviously been interesting to have known all along that it was going to be Perry, but it is sort of it's comics, it's monthly comics. We're all doing our best.
Oh yeah, I love Perry's art. I was first came across his on this when he did Spider-Woman. That was great.
And he's one of those people who just, like, he's pretty sort of unkillable in a way. Like I keep trying to sort of see, like, when is it going to be like, oh, that's too much, but he keeps going. And it's been fun. And the thing about Carnage is, like, because if someone asks me to write Carnage, I'm going to write Carnage, right? And then you don't really think about the age rating and everything. And we had an editor change at the very beginning of the book. So Perich come on, he started drawing the scripts, and then we got a new editor. And at some point there was a flying intestine, sort of, and it was flagged somewhere. And the editor was like, I don't think we can do that. I don't know. And then we didn't hear anything until it was a press release that said, oh, we had to change the age rating of Carnage. And we're like, oh, whoops. Like, but we're already on issue 3 or something. So we couldn't, so we just got, I don't know, a better age rating for what we were doing.
Give the old red band. That's all.
Yeah. And then at some point, because we had to remove the intestine, but then Perry later, he was sort of trying to test the water. So it kept sort of being like, hey, what if we do an intestine here? Are they going to say anything? And they didn't. So there's so many intestine, I'm just saying, in Carnage in the end.
I would assume you're not having any of these conversations in public, like on the phone, like, no, the body count needs to be higher. No, that intestine is not coming out. It needs to stay in.
But I would say that there are some emails that I send along where I'm like, this is a ridiculous job. Like, what are we doing? Like, there's 9 adult people on this email chain discussing whatever it is, right? And it's just the best thing. Like, it's just the most delightful thing ever. But yeah, but there are some times we will be like, I was talking to Perry we were in Brussels a couple of weeks ago, and we had one of those conversations where we started turning around and be like, oh, but it's comic books, I don't know. But then it turns out no one in Brussels speaks English anyway, so they were sort of like, that's fine, everything's fine.
No, you give me an idea while we've been talking. I'm like, I think the greatest interview thing, Lilith, would be get creators on every time we talk to a creator, be like, okay, what's in your Google search history? Read the emails that are going back and forth between your team. Let's see the weirdest thing.
I thought about that many a times. I was once in a hotel in Warsaw writing something very horrible, and Joe Biden, when he was vice president, was staying at the same hotel, and I was Googling the most horrific things, and then my internet just stopped for the rest. No one said, like, I don't know if it was related anyway, but I just felt like maybe I should wait a bit with this specific research so we're not in this whatever the fuck it is. But it is sort of like I'd say my Google history it's sort of freeing in a way too, right? Because you can always be just like, oh, well, I'm a writer, so that was relevant. I swear to God. Just the vajankle search, that was relevant. I swear I was trying to make a joke about something. Don't Google vajankles if you don't want to.
Oh my lord! But no, and I wanted to ask you: is there any Marvel or DC character you haven't had a chance to write? You would love to write. I could see you like on a Deadpool, like the dark humor, and I think a lot of your personality could come out through Deadpool. Like I could see him walking into a room and being saying, "You can't tell me the X-Men aren't horny. They're always horny."
Yeah, that would be. I mean, Deadpool. But I'm not sure if I'm funny enough. I would like. I would like to try at some point. I think. But Wolverine would be like. I would love a Wolverine story at some point. I would love to do. The most classic, most ridiculous Wolverine ever. That would be great. But and I mean, I would. I would love like a short Deadpool story where I can just really work very hard and have a mental breakdown because I don't feel like I'm funny enough or something. Because funny is it's really hard because you need to, and I enjoy the absurdity of things. That's sort of what I find. I find it delightful, but that doesn't necessarily translate to everyone. Like you have to, like whenever I'm in America, there's nothing I love more than the most American things ever. Like, well, I went to visit Jason Aaron in Kansas once, and the first thing we did was we went to get barbecue because it's fucking Kansas City, right? Like, you get some barbecue and get some burnt ends, and I gotta tell you, it was the best meal of my life, basically. Like, it's just. And so we get there and we'd ordered a bunch of food and there was a guy with 2 weapons standing in line and I'm like,
good old open carry.
I'd never. What do you do? This I'm delighted, just tiny bit terrified, and then they gave us the barbecue in like a cardboard box, like it was more food than like it could feed a small village. And I was just like, this is best. This is the best thing. And then we went to Walmart the next day because I was like, let's go to Walmart. I want to go to Walmart. And I walked out of the car and there was 2 people having an argument. So the first thing I heard when I opened the car was someone going, "Well, fuck you too." Like, I love it.
Walmart.
It's the best thing. It's just
not as nice as IKEA. Sorry about that.
I'm just saying, like, when in America, that's what you want, right? Like you want more barbecue than you can ever eat, and people being furious in the Walmart parking lot. It was brilliant.
Truly a genuine American experience. I can't confirm.
Yeah. It was. I mean, it was so great. But I will say that it's hard to get that to translate in a proper way on the page, because you have to get the like there are some Swedish references that I'm sure that I mean I hope the Swedes will take them, but then again there is sort of like in Sweden they have a different relationship with sort of the nobility than we do. We don't really have like they have a king and a queen and some people, but they don't really like they're like people, but they seem to have like a more sort of an adoration of the upper classes that we sort of take the piss out of, and I'm not sort of sure how, like, we can see it very clearly when we talk to people and hear about, like, there's a bar in Sweden where you can order like someone to wash the floor, which means that you get a bottle of champagne and then the woman will take another bottle of champagne and pour it out on the floor, which is sort of so stupid. But someone obviously thinks it's cool because this exists, right? But I don't think it could exist in Norway, but it does exist in Sweden. Anyway, shit like that, right? Like I'm sitting here being like delighted by something, and it's hard to get it to translate when you do comics. So humor is hard. It was, I suppose, the point. Comedy is very hard. So like Spider-Man, every time we use Spider-Man for anything, I'm like, I have a meltdown over the few one-liners we get in there just because I want them to be, Spider-Man-y funny, which is not sort of, you're not supposed to try too hard. It's just supposed to be, well, that's the thing, right? Yeah.
He's a smart ass, yeah.
Smart ass, but still charm. I don't know.
That's why I said Deadpool. I could see more of your natural voice coming through Deadpool.
Oh yeah, I feel, but that's the thing. Like when I was doing Jane Foster or the Valkyries in general, where you had Jane Foster, who is like she does like what people are supposed to do, like the good people. Like we all know what you're supposed to do. That's what Jane does. And then you had Runa, who is Valkyrie in the movies, and she does all the things that I would do. And it's sort of it was it was very clear to me. Like I love Jane, I fucking love Jane, but she's too good for me. Like I would never. Like who could ever be as good of a person as Jane Foster?
Uh, all right. I was gonna say, Lilith, do you have any other questions? Otherwise, we can let her go. But your creator-owned stuff. Do you want to promote your? Tell us about your creator-owned stuff.
No, I don't want to say anything yet. I'm trying to. I have. I don't know the thing is. It's a strange thing because we do the sort of whole secrecy until it's announced. Like I'm not sure if it's really. I don't know if when people do that, if they have any data to back up the fact that that's going to be the best strategy. But then again, it's always stupid if you do something and you announce it and then we get it delayed because of some nonsense. But I do have a couple of like strange things coming up. Like I have a story in. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the British comic scene, but in the 2000 AD, Rebellion, who published this 2000 AD, has an anthology called Scream, or they did at some point, and they're sort of bringing it back. And I have a story in that, which I'm sort of it's a fun little thing, and if you should check it out if you're into the horror stories. It's very British in many ways, which is also sort of interesting because they do have a very different. When you talk about comedy, they have a very different way of sort of twisting their humor than what Americans do. But it's a fun time, and I'm also doing the battle action. As a story for battle action, which is also a British anthology, but this is Garth and his sort of
and Brian K. Vaughan, right?
Oh yeah, Garth has sort of just picked the people that he wants to work with, and because it's Garth, he gets to do and he picked the story. Like it's great. It's like I sometimes think that Garth is more in touch with his inner child than anyone, in many ways. But I'm writing another Nina Petrova story, and I'm so excited about it. So I hope that people will check that out as well, and obviously Catwoman, please, because. I've labored over this thing. It's and I love it so much. So I do hope people will come along for the ride.
Are you allowed to say how many issues you've already written or are gonna write?
Well, I mean, I've written. I think I've written 7 or something. But they're real. We don't have a fixed ending thus far.
Cool.
So I'm just keeping, but I do have the first like 12 is planned out, and then we're gonna I have let's just it's such a delight. I can't say enough good things about just Ariana and James and the teams at DC, and just the experience of working with Catwoman so far. It's so much fun, and everyone involved is just like the covers are brilliant, the lettering is brilliant. Yes. Everyone's just killing themselves to make it good, and it's the best.
Oh yeah, no, awesome. That's I said we raved about it, and
that makes me happy.
Yes,
I haven't read any reviews because I mean I can't. My mental health, I need to save myself from something. But I do hope people enjoyed it.
It's great, and now for all that top secret stuff you can't talk about, probably just check your social media.
Yeah.
No, that's for Meese.
Just for the mooses. All the mooses.
That would be the best post to be like, oh, hey, I see I got your attention with that picture of a moose. Yeah, go. So go check out this new book that's coming out next weekend.
The thing is, what I find fascinating was I'm just trying to be, I'm on a social media, but I have and I do sincerely mean this, I have no interest in any discussions about anything with some faceless person on whatever. Like I did some TikToks for a while, and I have, let's see if I can turn this. I have this bookshelves there, which is it goes over 2 stories. and I built it myself. And the amount of men who's like, that's not structurally sound. Like, just shut what? Just shut the fuck up. That wouldn't hold up in an earthquake. I'm in Norway. We'll be fine. Like, it's the most sort of, I don't understand what I'm supposed. I'm too old for social media. I don't know. And it's so I just stick to the moose and the foxes, and then sometimes I'll meet people in real life who only know me through social media, and they have the most absurd idea of who I am, and I find it sort of delightful. In a like it's sort of fun to see how people look at whatever I do and sort of extrapolate and be like, oh, you're probably one of those. To the point where there was a guy once who asked, he told me that when I needed to step on someone's balls, his was at my disposal. What? What part of all the moves means that I want to step on someone's balls? I don't know. And I had that glorious moment of like, do I yell at him because he might be into the yelling? So I don't want to give him a freebie. I don't know. Anyway, point is, sometimes I'll be like, I do enjoy the fact that I don't know, they get whatever they want from whatever I post, and
Well,
and
are
that's
you going to
fine.
be at con soon, or
If I'm sorry,
any conventions anytime soon, or?
no, I'm done for the year. I think. Am I? Yes, I am done. I'm doing a signing in London in the middle of December. Other than that, I'm wintering.
Yes, enjoy your holiday season.
Oh yeah, just it's the dark season. If you know how to enjoy it, please tell me. It's more of a sort of hold
Mine is
on.
alcohol. Don't ask me. That's my answer for a lot of things.
Yeah. It's we have, like, as a country, we like, we have no liquor stores. We have what is literally called the wine monopoly, because we're trying to keep people from doing that exact thing, because we do drink a lot over here, because it gets dark and cold, and it's a sort of very I have like daylight lamps in every room trying to sort of fight the darkness, which is
Well,
sort
you
of
can
what.
always just read your comics, curl
Yeah.
up, chop
Yep.
your firewood.
Yeah. And then I usually I'll break down and I'll go to America at some point during the spring, just be like, oh, there are people. So, but I'm just waiting to see if, like, if there is an America in spring. It's gonna be. I'm hoping for it. I would like some more, barbecue and
Yeah, do some
those.
cons. Yeah, do some
Yeah.
conventions. Yeah.
And I will say that no, I love doing cons in America because they're also delightful and chatty and nice. Like in Norway, it's like if you ask someone like, how are you, their reaction will probably be like, what do you want to know, like, what's going on, like, what is this? And then you come to America and you have like all these friends just walking around. It's so good. But yeah, but I have nothing planned other than the Forbidden Planet in London, the 14th of December, I think.
Very cool. Shout out to all the international fans. You know what to do.
Yes. 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 All right. The great Torunn Gronbekk. Thank you so much. This was a delight. Just come back anytime. Again, if you next time you have something to promote, hit me up. We'll schedule another chat.
Oh yeah, I'll. The thing is, I sit around here working alone for months at a time, right? And I find it so nice to talk about comics with people. I tend to forget that it's being recorded and that you're technically working right now. But it's been lovely talking to you.
I mean, you
I'll
come back.
be back
You come
anytime.
back once a month if you want. I mean, just ask her.
Just shout out to the comics. Just
Yeah, right. It doesn't even have to be about comics.
A
Well,
movie
you
and
know,
all, yeah.
oh
no,
really?
yeah, no, it could be anything. No,
Oh.
I find you very interesting. No, just no.
Just please, can we talk like that? Yeah, that would be something, because I do I sincerely miss that sort of. I don't like people a lot, but I mean, there's just
This is the
sometimes
best of both worlds.
just
You don't. You can talk to people, but you don't have to be in the same room with people.
yeah. And the thing is, like, the comics people, I had a moment a few years ago where I was sort of because I do portrait painting and art and everything, and I had an exhibition in New York with like, and it was a big deal to me in many ways. But I scheduled it to be at the same time at New York Comic Con, And I was at this opening of my own exhibition, right? And I was looking at the New York art people who are like just like a parody of art people. No, like it's just they're. I don't know. It's a fascinating thing. It's like a South Park sketch. They're just there, and I was just like, I don't know if I sort of like. And then I went to New York Comic Con the next day. I'm like, oh, these are my people. I love these idiots. Like this is great. So I find that I miss the comics people a lot when I'm just hanging around doing life. So yeah, I'll be back. We'll talk about anything. That's great.
Again, you come on, promote whatever you're doing at the time, and then we just random bullshit. Yeah.
Random bullshit. That's
yes. Oh, random bullshit with Torunn Gronbekk. Yes, that's the title of the show.
Yeah. That is sincerely what this episode should be called.
No.
Horny random bullshit with Torunn Gronbekk.
Yes.
Let's go.
Once a month, you're gonna have a regular show. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I hope you have a great night.
Yes.
Yep.
Stay warm in the dark season.
Oh yeah, we had our first snow yesterday. I'm gonna stay warm. There's a heating blanket. There's a whole thing. I'm ancient. Anyway, thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you guys.
Thank you. You too.